Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to our May webinar. Our speaker today is Dr. Todd Ward. He's the president. Before I begin talking, can everyone hear me? Dr. Ward, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Dr. Ward is the president and founder of BACB Media, which owns a top non-academic behavior analytics site in the world, BACB21.org. Today, he will be giving his talk titled Fulfilling Skinner's Vision Through Entrepreneurship, and he will be discussing elements of entrepreneurial repertoire and how to become a successful ABA entrepreneur. So I will hand the stage over to you, Dr.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me today. So I'm Dr. Todd Ward, president of BACB21 Media, and if you haven't done so already, check out our website, BACB21.org. That acronym is actually an abbreviation of the blog portion of our site, which stands for Behavioral Science in the 21st Century. And over the years, it has evolved into many other things beyond that, into a more comprehensive media outlet for behavior analysis in a variety of different ways beyond the blog that we have. So our mission today is really disseminating behavior analysis around the world and supporting ABA companies around the globe in many different ways. And the primary way I'm going to talk about today is entrepreneurship. And we do a lot of coaching and advising. We have clients across 5 countries right now that we're actually help to starting businesses and to disseminate the field. So as a brief outline, we have 3 main parts. The first is to go over Skinner's vision of what he actually saw for the field of behavior analysis. Then the second part is a brief look at where we actually are today as a field. And the third part is paving a way forward. So if any of you are familiar with Skinner's books, he was always looking at the big picture. He was always talking about those big world issues, right? So if you turn on your news in the evening, all of the issues you hear about all over the world, that's the kind of stuff Skinner was talking about. And that was really the goal, the ultimate goal of his science. And all the way back in his first book, Behavior of Organisms, back in 1938, he was even alluding to this. He said near the end, the importance of a science of behavior derives largely from the possibility of an extension to human affairs, and let him extrapolate who will. So he was making the case that even in Behavior of Organisms, if any of you have read that, it's about his work with his dissertation and other work in the animal laboratory. But even then, he was calling on people to take the basic principles that he was discovering there and to start applying them to the world at large. So fast forward nearly 10 years later into the 40s, and he came out with his book. This is actually a work of fiction, if you've never read it. It's called Walden 2. It's described as a modern utopia, pictures a society in which human problems are solved by a scientific technology of human conduct. So I would definitely recommend checking this out as an interesting read, especially if you're in academia right now and you want to break from technical writing. This could be a nice break for you. But he was basically, the book centers on an entire community that is based on the principles of behavior. And mainly the book sort of takes us on a tour of this community, and it's very interesting. And there's actually a few real life communities that have actually came about over the years. Some of them are still around today that are actually based on Walden 2. Los Horcones in Mexico, and a few others in the United States. So across many of his books, his next major book after this was Science and Human Behavior, and he devotes a lot of time in that book talking about various aspects of broader society. And one central component that he devotes many pages to is this notion of controlling agencies. And he says our behavior in society is controlled by controlling agencies through their power to reinforce and punish behavior. He says these controls, which are often too evident in their practical application, are more than sufficient to permit us to extend the results of our science to daily affairs. And it's now more important than ever to understand the processes involved and to prepare for the problems that will arise in the future. So again, you know, that was all the way back in 1958 where he was saying these things. So just a very brief overview of some of the main controlling agencies he was talking about. And I'm just illustrating these just to give you a brief idea of the scope that Skinner really had in mind for our science. So the first one is government. When we're talking about government, he notes that our notions of right and wrong become legal and illegal behavior. Government agencies of various sorts fall into this category, of course, from the federal to local level. He talks, of course, about following rules or codes that are then linked to aversive consequences. So obviously, in this case, he's talking about laws, right? So following laws is rule-governed behavior that are tied to mainly penalties, but there are movements happening now, and we have a few articles on our site that talks about alternative things such as positive policing, where it's a practice of law enforcement through incentives or reinforcers rather than punishers. Religion was the next big one. He says, well, here, legal and illegal behavior become moral and sinful behavior. Heaven and hell represent positive and negative reinforcement and punishment. And these ideas are then sort of translated into religious institutions, religious practices, and the very behavior that you see in society. Economics was the third major one. So here we're likening behavior to the production of goods and wealth and money. He devotes a lot of time here talking about money, wages, and pay schedules. So these are certainly things that if you are affiliated with the OBM network, you know a lot about. Bill Abernathy's book, Sin of Wages, is an entire book devoted to pay for performance and pay schedules as opposed to pay for time. This is interesting. I wanted to put this in here. If any of you are looking for jobs, maybe keep this in mind. He notes that when a worker accepts or rejects the offer of a job, he may be said to be comparing positive and negative reinforcers. So of course you have money, but it also, there's many other aspects to a job that can affect not only productivity, but worker morale and all sorts of things that could indirectly lead to you eventually leaving. And we also have education. He noted that the family itself functions as an initial educating agency. So many of you here probably have kids. You know, when I do myself, parents' primary role when they're interacting with their kids is educating them in a variety of different ways and interacting with them and enriching their environment with language and other things. He, of course, talks about educational reinforcement, such as grades, promotions at work, getting degrees, medals, and things like that. And then he talks about the main outputs from educational institutions as being skills, various work skills, or verbal knowledge as educational products. All right, so that was back in the 50s, Science and Human Behavior. Fast forward a few decades to 1971, and Beyond Freedom and Dignity. This is a great book. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. I think this was actually on the bestseller list back in 1971. He noted here, and sort of with an increased air of pessimism, he says, things grow steadily worse, and it is disheartening to find that technology itself is increasingly at fault. So one of Skinner's main points is he's advocating for a technology of behavior, while at the same time saying technology in the form of products, I guess you could say, while they do some good, they also do some bad things. So he gives a few examples here. He says, advances in medicine brought about by technology can also contribute to overpopulation. Nuclear weapons might make war more efficient and function as deterrents and things, but they also bring new devastation to the world. It says the affluent pursuit of happiness also contributes to pollution. So here you can see there's always, from his perspective, sort of two sides to the same coin. Each advance can also bring with it, I guess, what some people have called these ecological effects down the road. So then he started offering up, his main point here was that, you can have all the technology in the world, but a lot of times what it comes down to is people behaving with respect to that technology. So he notes, for example, that contraceptives only really work if people actually use them. A nuclear holocaust can only really be prevented if the conditions that evoke war change. And those conditions are really the behavioral products of other people. And then pollution will continue until our practices change. So his solution, he notes here at the very beginning of Beyond Freedom and Dignity, he says, what we need is a technology of behavior. So this is sort of a different type of technology, not so much in the form of new technological advancements in the forms of mechanical types of things. In this case, I brought in Merriam-Webster. He's really talking about the practical application of knowledge, especially in particular areas. So in this case, this knowledge would come from the science of behavior as a capability given by the practical application of knowledge. So he's referring to the practical application of behavioral principles to solve the world's problems. Okay, so that was a very, very brief overview of Skinner's grand vision. Of course, the few minutes I actually spend on it cannot really do it justice, but hopefully I gave you just enough, especially for those of you, and there's actually an increasing number of people in the field these days who are not familiar with Skinner at all and have definitely not read his books. So I definitely urge you to go check it out, because he's really, in many ways, the things he's talking about and the field he envisioned is very different than the field that we have today. So part 2 is going to look a little bit at where we are today as a field. So the first place I went to was the ABAI website to look at their conference program. And if you're interested, you can verify these numbers for yourself. You can just go to their conference page, and I think it's on the left-hand column. You can actually look at all of these submissions across there. I believe they have 15 or 16 different tracks of the conference. So what I found is that 5 areas actually comprise more than half of the events at ABAI. Autism, excuse me, is at the top with 115 submissions, accounting for approximately 21% of the conference. Then we have practice issues of various sorts, mainly applies to clinical practice of behavior analysis. We have 81 submissions, or 15% of the total conference. Then we have education, which Skinner also talked a lot about. We have 51 submissions, about 9% of the conference. And then clinical, family, and behavioral medicine rounding out the top 5, adding 8%. Oh, excuse me, that was number 4. The last one is developmental disabilities at 7%, or 39 submissions. So the remaining 11 areas, including organizational behavior management and many others, together they comprise the remaining 47% of the conference. And yeah, you could make some exceptions and say I should have gone and counted the Obium network presentations and all of that, but I'm not publishing this in a journal. So we can also look at the BACB certification growth. So this is just meant, again, to give us a brief snapshot of the field right now. we can look at certifications. So this is available on BACB.com. Right now, there's approximately 24,000 BCBAs and BCBADs around the world. And then that number nearly doubles when you account for RBTs. So RBTs has really exploded over the past few years, and there's approximately 23,000 of them now around the world. And lastly, we have BCABAs at approximately 2,000 worldwide. Okay, so a few years ago, a company worked with a BACB and other groups. That company was called Burning Glass, and they came out with a very thorough report that gave the state of the field and job growth and job demand of the field of behavior analysis. And I'd highly recommend checking this out if you're interested. It's freely available online. You could just Google Burning Glass BCBA or ABA, and I'm sure you'll find it. So across this time period, they found over 7,000 job postings for behavior analysis, and they postulated roughly 118% growth in demand for behavioral services, and the top 3 areas had to do with healthcare, educational services, and social assistance. And most of these jobs require experience with autism, developmental disabilities, and treatment plans. We can also take a look at training programs. So if you go to the BCBA website, this information is all available there as well. I specifically looked at the BACB pass rate data that they come out with every year. And I guess there should be a small caveat, because if you are a new program, they give you a few years to establish yourself before you get on this list. So again, this is really just meant to give us a snapshot here. So currently there are about 93 BCBA programs around the world right now. Many of those are online. Some of those are in person. Others are hybrid, online and in person. By contrast, there are 20 ABAI accredited master's programs and 11 ABAI accredited doctoral programs. And interestingly, there are 2 ABAI accredited bachelor's programs now, which is an interesting development. It's also interesting to note here that most BCBA programs out there, most of those 93 programs are not ABAI accredited, and actually the BCBA and ABAI have very different standards for accreditation. One is not necessarily better or worse than the other, but they definitely have different purposes for which they have been designed. So I asked the question, what would Skinner say? I think he would say we have a good start. These clinical areas are definitely pressing social issues, and solving social issues and the world's problems is definitely in line with Skinner's vision, though I don't think he really ever talked about autism or developmental disabilities. Either way, I think they fall into his vision. However, I think we have a lot of work to do, and what I am starting to see, so this is really just my opinion, but I talk to a lot of people. I'm on the phone all the time, every week, with a very large cross-section of people in our field. And just in my own work, I've done OBM, and also I've done clinical work. What I feel is happening is the following: that we have behavior analysis, which is the comprehensive science of all human and animal behavior, with experimental, applied, and theoretical philosophical domains. That then turns into applied behavior analysis. So ABA is the application of the comprehensive science to all the world's problems. That then is reduced to ABA therapy, which is a clinical application of ABA to certain populations. And then ABA therapy then starts becoming synonymous with the VB map or the ABLES, and to some in the field, and just the way things have evolved, I feel that many are not really getting the full picture of what our science is really about, and that our science is not encapsulated by the VB map or ABLES. It's a lot more than that. I will also say I've used both of those assessments many times. I could probably do a VB map in my sleep, and they're extremely useful for what they're designed for, but they are definitely not the entirety of the field. So what I fear is happening is that our field is becoming a set of topographically defined tools for a specific skill set and a specific population. Rather, in my view, it is really a formless science. It's really more of a worldview, actually, that's based on basic principles. And then you should be able to take those principles and apply them in any way they need to be applied to meet our analytic goals of prediction and influence of behavior regarding whatever domain you happen to be working in. And again, a growing number of BCBAs today are not familiar with Skinner. I'm encountering that more and more. So as a general test, I would recommend that each of you go home tonight and turn on your evening news, or maybe get on CNN or something and their website, and for every news story you see, ask yourself if you can talk about that from the standpoint of behavior analysis. And if you can't, maybe think about why, because I think that's really what Skinner had his eye on the whole time. Okay, so part 3, we're looking at a way forward. So how have we fulfilled this vision, and what more can we do about it? So back in '82, he was asking the same question: why aren't we acting to save the world? He was suggesting that the contingencies aren't aligned with the survival of the species, that in his view, contingencies were more aligned with the benefit of particular individuals. And he provided as a solution what he called the uncommitted. So he felt this group was those that are less influenced by the controlling agencies he just mentioned a second ago in government and economics and things. However, I don't really know if you can really find anyone that is in that uncommitted world. So he did provide some examples of academics, researchers, educators, and the media, but really, I mean, we're all committed. I mean, it's almost self-contradictory, actually, to propose controlling agencies and then say some people aren't affected by them. But it's a good start. Mattaini and Luke, back in 2014, they were picking up on this theme as well. For those of you that don't know, Mark Mattaini is a longtime editor of the great journal Behavior and Social Issues, who have really had Skinner's original vision at heart since they have been around since the 70s and 80s, depending on which iteration of the journal you're thinking of. So they're asking the question, why are behavior analysts not acting more aggressively to have an impact on these larger problems? They did an analysis of ABAI in 2014, and they found that only 13 presentations really focused on larger issues. They noted that the first special interest group, Behaviors for Social Responsibility, once numbered in the hundreds and now has only approximately 20 members. So they offered up several solutions, many of which were focused in the university. They recommended things such as adjusting your mission statements of university programs and adjusting the course sequences as they align with new mission statements. They also advocated for an increased focus on interdisciplinary programs, so collaborating with those folks that may be more directly involved in those controlling agencies, such as people in economics or sociology, anthropology, education, and so on. They advocated for more and diverse internships, media outlets, diversifying guest speakers, sort of like how we do for the B.F. Skinner lectures. And a lot of their solutions focus on behavioral systems analysis. So many of you, if you're affiliated with the OBM network, are probably very familiar with behavioral systems analysis. It takes a bit of a broader view than OBM in a sense of performance management, where behavioral systems analysis, they look at the broader organization, not only the performance of individuals, but how their performance interlocks to form work processes and how the larger system which is really comprised of behavior and behavioral products, how that is then affected by the outside macro system, consisting of competition and demand and cultural factors, regulations, and so on. In 2014, there was also a very interesting development put on by Dr. Ramona Homenfar and several others called the Leadership and Cultural Change Seminar. Some of you, I'm sure, were there. They focus, of course, on behavioral systems analysis. Other themes included management in a global energy company, consumer behavior analysis, which deals a lot with marketing and advertising, behavior-based safety at a petroleum refinery, cultural change at a medical school, creating organizations to evolve a more caring society, so Tony Beglin's work, behavioral education, public perception of behavior analysis, dissemination in Italy, and a lot of that dissemination in Italy involves behavior-based safety, and several others. And I took this quote, so a lot of, or most of those presentations became parts of special issues, either in JOBM, or I believe there was another one in the Behavior Analyst. And I took this quote here. It says, "The papers share a conviction that profound cultural change is necessary in this historical moment, and that the science of behavior has an opportunity and a responsibility to contribute to such change." All right. So to sum up here and where we are, or what we have done, I think we're doing great in the clinical area. I don't think very many people would argue with that, but we have so much more to do to fulfill Skinner's vision. And frankly, we also have so much more to do in the clinical area as well. And especially in impoverished countries, one of our clients is working in such an area right now. Many people recognize the need to do more, and some work has already been done, and we've already highlighted a little bit of that work. There is much more work that has been done that I, of course, did not talk about, a lot related to recycling and other types of things. I would recommend you check out Behavior and Social Issues, the JOBM, of course, and Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. A lot of the early work came from JABA. And a lot of it had to do with environmental sustainability back in the 70s. So many of the calls to action call for behavioral systems analysis. So how our behavior operates in dynamic organizational and cultural contexts, right? And those contexts are really comprised of behavior and behavioral products. Okay, I'm gonna take a brief second here. Also, if anyone has any questions, we'll wait to the end to answer those. So here we get to entrepreneurship. I think entrepreneurship, as entrepreneurs, we take the same theme that has been discussed, which is behavioral systems analysis, but we attack it from a different angle, really. I view entrepreneurship as creating real solutions for real people in the real world out there. Through entrepreneurship, our ultimate goal in this case is to create more and diverse jobs for behavior analysts. I think that's ultimately what it's going to come down to. And I think that is a large factor in our success in autism and other developmental disabilities, because the fact is that you and me have to pretty much do two things every day, which is pay our mortgage and feed our kids. And we would prefer to do that with behavior analysis. And right now, the main way to do that is through autism and clinical work. So what it's really coming down to is people who want to create companies that are innovative, that provide real solutions that people find value in, that can create more and diverse job opportunities, so more behavior analysts can spend their time doing behavior analysis in more and diverse ways to feed their kids and pay their mortgage. I also wanted to note here that OBM is not entrepreneurship. OBM really assumes the existence of an organization, that it already exists, and it's really focusing on existing performance issues. I view OBM as one component skill set of a broader entrepreneurial repertoire. So it's not only about improving performance and providing performance feedback. There is a whole host of other skills related to broader systems and even related to business and the whole financial aspect and marketing and all sorts of things that are not really encapsulated in pure OBM. So with entrepreneurship here, we're really creating something from nothing. We're creating something that has not previously existed. We're creating a new company, a new product or service. This has an explicit behavioral systems analysis focus. This is, in my view, kind of the most, I don't know if I want to say extreme, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. The most extreme application of behavioral systems analysis, and that you have to take account of the larger system to actually create something that does not exist and to make it sustainable. It's all sorts of things like the macro system, looking at competition, regulations, all sorts of things. An explicit focus on adaptation is crucial in entrepreneurship. Doing market analyses, a SWOT analysis. It's a very simple tool you can use that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a really great tool to get you thinking about your company as a whole. And of course, business skills that are outside behavior analysis and OBM as well. Some of which a lot of entrepreneurs kind of learn on their own. They learn through doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my story here and my journey through entrepreneurship, because frankly, I think it's the most exciting way to live your life. And you can really you're really connected to the output of your own work and making a difference in the world. So around 2011, I started the blog, Behavioral Science in the 21st Century, and I actually started it while working on my dissertation at the University of Nevada, Reno, and it was actually a break from my dissertation. So I started, for those of you that have been in grad school and especially a PhD, you're just living in this world of technical literature all the time. And you're learning about all sorts of things and you're just literally living in it 25 hours a day. And I frankly needed a way to talk about some of that stuff in a non-academic way and in a way that other people find engaging, that are not behavior analysts, that are not academics or people who are technically trained. So I want to reach everyone else because there's a whole world out there. 2013, I got my PhD from UNR. I got a university job and I let the site go for a year or two. Then in January of 2015, I revived the website as a sole proprietorship, which is the simplest business form, the simplest form that your business can take. There's also no legal separation between you as a person and you and your company. So I don't recommend it for everyone, depending on what you're doing. But we quickly gained good traffic numbers and we started getting ad revenue, selling ads. October 2015, left the university, started doing in-home ABA for a while, and that's when I formed B-Side 21 Media, which is an LLC or limited liability company. The main advantage there, of course, is that it gives you liability protection. You now have a separate legal entity that is different from you as a person. And so basically, if anyone sues you and you're operating your company in the right way, your personal assets, your personal money of you and your family will be pretty well protected. Across the year 2016, we started diversifying our services. So we were no longer just a blog. We were really evolving into a full-fledged media company. So our first service was B-Side Web Design, where we're helping to disseminate the field by creating websites for people, mainly people who are starting their own companies and they need a web presence. B-Side Writing, paid writing jobs that we have with other companies that help expose most of this ultimately functions to help expose other companies. And so we have several agreements in place. So this is non-academic writing jobs. Again, this is all aimed to reach the world, right? So I think, and frankly, people have told me, a lot of people don't like writing. right? I do like writing, and a lot of people in behavior analysis are only trained to write in a technical way for journals. And journals certainly have their place, but dissemination is not one of them. And so there's definitely a gap out there that we're trying to fill with that. And then we have BACB Entrepreneurial. This is our entrepreneurial consulting. Now we have clients all over the world, and we're helping to disseminate behavior analysis by helping other people start companies. Some of these companies are clinical, others are more outside the box. I'm not going to get really into the specifics of those because we have non-disclosure agreements, but again, all of these just help promote and disseminate and support the field around the world. Lastly, BACB Studios. This is photo and video production. Mainly it has been in the form of video editing so far, editing video for other companies, and then they're using that video for various promotional things or continuing education videos and things of that nature. So we're chasing a particular function or outcome in all of this, which is to disseminate the field to the world and to support ABA companies around the globe. Finally, we have our CE series. It's called ABA Outside the Box, which specifically focuses on topics that you probably will not find in your typical BCBA course sequence. And a lot of them right now have to do with ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and relational frame theory. And there's some OBM themes intertwined in that as well. So November 1st, 2016, it was a historic day. I cut the cord from my employer. I moved from employee life to entrepreneur life. And since then, I've been on my own, fully self-employed on my own company. So today, our website is getting over 60,000 monthly views from the ABA community all over the world. This is really structured to embrace Skinner's idea of selection by consequences. So we have an overarching LLC, which provides us with the liability protection. But those services that I just described to you are structured in a way where we can very easily create, change, modify, or kill off our services with a minimum of logistical and bureaucratic hurdles. So we're really embracing this idea of agility and flexibility and adaptation and being sensitive to what's happening in the environment and the marketplace, which I think wholeheartedly embraces selection by consequences. So now I'm going to talk about a few lessons learned in entrepreneurship and how you can use it to sort of create your own life path and help break into new areas that we have not broken into before. And a lot of these tips come from an article I recently put out called Entrepreneurial Tips for BCBAs Who Want a New Career Path. So lesson number one, I would suggest building on your own strengths. And these lessons here are specifically focused on people who are interested in doing something that's kind of outside of the box, right? So of course, your strengths, obviously you have strengths in the field of behavior analysis. This can include any number of things such as data analysis, research, assessment, talking to parents, pairing, training, things like that. You of course also have other strengths that actually have nothing to do with the field, and these are also useful. Can be anything. And I tried to actually pick the most obscure things that on first glance don't have anything to do with the field, such as writing. Well, writing does, but cooking, art, sports, sewing, fishing, things like that. My own personal strengths had to do with writing and media. I was a broadcasting major before I became a psychology major. So I kind of had that background as well. So this was kind of an opportunity for me to come full circle with that. Okay, the good news here is whatever strength that you write down, no matter what it is behavior. And that's the realm of behavior analysis. Okay, so lesson number two, align your values. So to me, the whole point of being an entrepreneur is to follow your own value directions in life. because you are in complete control of your life direction as an entrepreneur. You're no longer an employee. It's all up to you. So if you are not passionate about your entrepreneurial goals, you probably will not stick with it through the anxious times. And quite frankly, there are a lot of anxious times, and any entrepreneur you talk to will describe the roller coaster ride that is entrepreneurship. So one day you will feel like you're on top of the world, and the next day you will almost be having an anxiety attack and freaking out about something. And then the next day you're back to normal. That's just sort of how it goes. So there's been some work in JOBM on values from a few different perspectives. Skinner certainly talked about values as well. We're talking about values here from an ACT perspective. And there's some articles in JOBM that talk about that as related to OBM as well. But from an ACT perspective, values are global life directions that can never be fulfilled. And they really function as motivative augmentals or motivating operations that can establish new life directions as reinforcing. And we've actually done some work in this area affecting things like staff turnover and other sorts of things, team communication and whatnot, if you're interested in learning more about that work that we have done. You can think of values as actions. Try to think of your past experiences that you've truly enjoyed and try to extract valued actions from them, and try to use the suffix ing as well. So for example, if your strength is in sports, you might extract working with a team or competing for a goal as values. If your particular strength is cooking, you might extract bringing people together, things like that. So in every life such situation, you can track how your behavior serves your value direction, which can alter the functions of different life events for you. If you value learning, for example, you can learn in every situation and you never stop learning. The value of learning can alter the function of aversive events, like that aggressive client you might have. Dealing with that aggression, might shift from being an aversive event to being a learning opportunity. So my own values relate to disseminating, meeting people, talking to other people, and agility and flexibility. Lesson number 3, you might have to adjust your view of behavior analysis, just depending on your background. I would suggest viewing behavior analysis in functional terms rather than topographical terms. I don't think we're defined by our procedures. We're really formless. It's a worldview based on principles, not procedures. We have analytic goals of prediction and influence based on principles. So if you don't free yourself up from this hang up on procedures, you might have a hard time really being truly innovative in the field and doing things that other people are not doing. And frankly, you know, if we were truly defined by procedures, we would all be still doing work in the pigeon lab and things, and that's simply not the case. Okay, lesson number 4, put the pieces together. Whatever you wrote down earlier, start trying to create relationships between your strengths and values and potential products or services. This is where you can start elaborating on your own verbal repertoire to try to create that relational network there. And you can just see what you come up with. You know, Skinner had an article once, it was called something like discovering what you have to say. And a lot of times, once you just start putting things down on paper, you discover new ideas that you would never discover otherwise. So this can be a great exercise to kind of discover what your entrepreneurial passion might be. Even if you don't think you have one could definitely emerge in this exercise. So how can your strengths align with your value direction? How can your strengths and values lead to new products or services that fulfill a need in society? And really, in my view, as entrepreneurs, that's what we're doing, is we're fulfilling needs in society. And people are paying us money because they find value in our products and services because they fulfill some sort of need out there. You can take two general approaches to entrepreneurship. One is the Shark Tank approach, where you try to go for investors and get a huge infusion of cash right away, which could be useful depending on what you're trying to do. I think for a lot of what we would probably do in our field, that you might not need to go that direction. So I took the low and slow approach, or what it's also called bootstrapping. And I did that across 2 years. So bootstrapping is simply using your own money, building up your own financial cushion, and just using your own money to start a business and slowly grow it over time. And I had, a full-time job as well. So I was just growing it on the side. Most of what we would provide are likely services rather than products. So this is an advantage for us. There's less overhead associated with services, less in the way of logistics and bureaucracy. You don't really need to worry a whole lot about inventory or contracting deals with manufacturers to produce your products and things like that. And the products that we do have a lot of times can be digital, right? So you can think of our continuing education videos as products, but those are digital products. I don't have to work with any sort of supplier or manufacturer or anything. So we're at a real advantage there, being service-based. One thing I tell people all the time in our client base, our entrepreneurial clients, is to think about successive approximations. Like for those of you who have done applied work, a lot of the principles that you use working with your kiddo can apply just as well to entrepreneurship and leadership in your organization. So one of these is creating successive approximations to your end goal, right? So you might come up with your dream business idea, and you might not be able to get there just today, but you could probably do something to start yourself on a path. So I gave this talk before in Canada, and I just gave it again last week, and the audience there was mainly BCBAs. So I'm not sure how many of you in this audience are BCBAs, but if you do have the BCBA credential, you can sell continuing education. So that is an immediate source of income. So first step there is to become an ACE provider through the BACB. It's really not that difficult. You can become either an individual ACE provider, or you can become an organizational provider for your company. So B-Side 21 Media is an organizational provider of CEs. If you're doing more typical ABA work, if you're working with parents and staff, take that parent training you have, take that staff training that you have already on your computer and record it. Now you have a CE that you can sell. Create a simple website. It's easier than ever these days to create a website. Almost anyone can do it with, we use WordPress, but there's a lot of other companies out there too. You don't really have to know much in the way of programming or anything. Create a simple site, sell it, advertise it on Facebook. Facebook is a great advertising tool, and you can spend, if you wanted to, you could just spend $10 and see how it goes. And it gives you lots of data and lots of ways to target different populations. So if you've done this, now suddenly you're generating passive income that's flowing into your business account, right? And might not be a whole lot, but it's something, and it's more than you had before. So you're starting to build your cushion. And if it's passive income, it's not connected to your actions anymore. So you can be making money while you sleep. Okay, so now you can take those same trainings that you've done before, put a different spin on them, sell them as PDF ebooks on your website. Now you have 2 digital products generating passive income for your business. So again, taking small approximations to financial independence here. Use your income to buy paid Facebook ads to precisely target different groups and populations. You definitely want to build an email list through MailChimp over time. I think that's kind of the long-term lifeblood of a website, and just having a web presence. And frankly, everyone lives on the internet these days. So in my mind, if you don't have a website, you kind of don't exist, because that's where all the eyes are. And I think you need a web presence regardless of what your business is. Get on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and depending on what you're doing, Instagram and a few others might be valuable for you. Get Hootsuite to schedule all of your marketing posts. At B-Side 21, we have the goal of releasing a post every 4 hours, and that can all be pre-programmed across all of our networks. So we're actually releasing articles right now, and I'm able to go and do other things like this webinar and not worry about it because it's all automated. This is one that I feel is very important. It has definitely served me well, and I've just had to learn this by doing, but learn how to use LinkedIn. And in particular, learn how to become a good networker through LinkedIn. It has really been incredibly valuable. I get multiple phone meetings every week based on my interactions with people on LinkedIn. And there are a few just tiny things you could do on LinkedIn that are just, few little tiny things you can do, but it's basically all centered on starting conversations with people, just finding a way to start a conversation with someone. And once you have done that, who knows where the conversation might lead and what you might find that you have in common and what opportunities might be laying inside of that conversation for you to develop. As you're following builds, if you're getting traffic, you can start selling ads on your website. That's revenue stream number 3 right there. So you have some money coming in and you're building your network, you're a little closer to financial independence. And that's really what it's all about. It's about getting yourself in a situation where you can take that leap from being an employee to being self-employed. So while you let your accounts build up for a while, think about future approximations to your own end goals. Work on your business plan, your mission and vision. It's good. I would recommend starting with your mission and vision first. Our vision is basically Skinner's vision to have a technology behavior for the world, and we do that by disseminating ABA around the world and supporting ABA companies around the globe. For business plans, there's lots of online tools, PDFs that you can download, or interactive business plan tools. Small Business Association is one in particular that you could use. Also, utilize free business advisors. This is something I did early on. I think I visited them at least 5 times. Every county that you live in through their Chamber of Commerce should have something called the Small Business Development Center or something very similar. And these are completely free, and you can go to these people just to talk about your idea. And these people don't know anything about our science, but they do have business experience, and that is valuable. And sometimes it is valuable to receive input from people who don't know anything about our science, because you get a fresh perspective, and also it gives you practice in talking about your ideas to people who do not have that background, which is also a good skill. Seek out those that can add value to your business through LinkedIn and conferences and other opportunities. Put a note here, some of these people may not be behavior analysts. If you think about a business, it's kind of the same as behavior. We don't have a monopoly on behavior. It's an inherently interdisciplinary phenomenon. Same thing as for business. We don't have a monopoly on business either. There are many, many different professions that can all hook in and help what you're doing, whether it's related to sponsorships or marketing, web development, financial planning, all sorts of different things. Your HR person, it could go on and on. Okay, we're about to wrap up here, but ask yourself, as you're thinking through this and starting on this journey, there's a few good things to keep in mind. Ask yourself, do you really need that office space, or do you really need whatever to spend money on some expensive thing right now, or can you get by without it? If you're starting an in-home autism provider, for example, you don't need office space. You can work from your home. You can have staff meetings through Google Hangouts. You don't really need an office at the start. Do you really need employees, or can you do everything yourself to start with? You should ask yourself that question. There's also important differences between employees and contractors, or being what is known as now a solopreneur. Employees generally come with more logistics behind them, whereas contractors are more straightforward. It's more based on by the job type of thing. And you have to treat people certain ways depending on if they're employees or contractors as well. So there's just many different pros and cons to both of those. It's also important to ask yourself, what is the function of your business, product, or service? And you can serve that function in many different ways. This is actually a very common thing that I end up talking with my clients about. If they're getting hung up on something, whoops, excuse me. Here we go. One of my clients, for example, wanted to purchase a building to start a certain type of center. And I was talking with her about it, and she was kind of getting anxious about it and everything. And I asked her, well, what function do you really want this to serve? And she explained it to me, and I said, you don't need a center to do that. You can do that in a lot of other ways that don't involve you paying rent on the property and the electric bill and getting extra liability protection associated with that property, and so on and so forth. There's many other less involved, less financially and liability intense ways of serving the same function, but in lots of different ways. Finally, the internet is really the great equalizer. It's kind of this democratizing force. Everybody kind of has a voice these days, and most people through the internet and social media can reach very large groups of people in ways that you couldn't do just a decade ago. Also, persistence is key. For example, with my business, with my website, if we're just talking about web traffic for a second, if I let it go for a couple of days, it starts going down. And if I'm not out there trying to gain clients for our entrepreneurial service or other things, business goes down. So you definitely have to be persistent over time. And lastly, don't rush it if you don't need to. If you have a good job right now that you're happy with, but you would also maybe like to pursue another passion eventually, just find that first approximation you can take. There's no need to rush it unless you're in some sort of special circumstance. All right, that's about it. I just wanted to point out two events that I'm involved with at ABAI this year. First is a panel called Let's Start a Business, Fulfilling Skinner's Vision Through Entrepreneurship. I have 3 other panelists that will be with me, many of whom are affiliated with bsci21.org. And they're actually all female entrepreneurs in behavior analysis, and they've all done very, very interesting things in the field. And we're going to be talking about just the journey that you go on as an entrepreneur, and a little bit on that emotional roller coaster, what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And then we're going to touch on sort of clinical aspects, but also non-clinical forms of entrepreneurship and Skinner's larger vision too. Also, I would like to point out, I'm an area coordinator for ABAI, and I was able to bring in Amy Cosper for a BF Skinner lecture. So Amy Cosper, up until very recently, was the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur magazine, and she's going to be giving BF Skinner lecture called Disruption and the Impact of Creating a New Future and New Opportunities. And so this idea of disruption that she's going to be talking about is basically creating new cultural practices, creating new ways in which the world functions, but doing it through entrepreneurship. All right. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for your time. This is a plug for our BSci entrepreneurial service here. If you're interested, or if you would like to get a PDF version of this presentation, I would be more than happy to send it your way. Just send me an email at todd.ward@bsci21.org. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Ward, we actually only have a minute left, but if you had time to answer just one quick question.
Sure.
Jessica asked, what advice would you give a grad student who is interested in bringing behavior analytics services into weight or health management?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this whole area of health is actually, I'm hearing more and more people, and we actually have a few clients involved in this too. There's some articles on our website. It's kind of, I predict it's going to be kind of the next big thing, is applying behavior analysis to the area of health. So as a student, you kind of have an advantage right now, I think, in that a lot of your time as a grad student, you're in school right now. You might not have, I guess it depends on your life situation, if you're also working and whatnot, but you can really take some time to really figure out right now, before you graduate, the direction that you want to go, and get one of those business plans. Think about what you value. Look into the literature, see what other people have done related to health, and maybe how you can help innovate that and bring it into a specific product or service for the world.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you to everyone who attended. And we hope to see everyone again the last week of June for our next webinar. Thank you, Dr. Ward.
Thank you, and feel free, anyone, to email me if you have any other questions.
Okay, great, thank you.